Hi, everybody. Welcome to another version of the Bruce Singer podcast. I'm your host. I'm Bruce Singer. And also what I do is I am CEO of Canada CFOs, which provides a contract, part-time and fractional CFOs to growth-oriented companies part-time. That's the space that I play in. And I'm very, very excited to have this guest, Jared Kligerman, on the Bruce Singer podcast today. And before Jared talks, I got to tell you some stuff about Jared, which is really cool. First, he is president of the think Tank, which is a marketing communication agency. He's going to talk more about that. He's co-founder of Wander Butters. We're going to get into that too. And by the way, just a little side topic. This podcast is what I call Land of the Giants. You don't see, but we're sitting. I'm 6'7", and when I met Jared, he's actually taller than me, 6'8". So we've had a good conversation about where to find clothes before the podcast. So this is a unique one. Land of the Giants. Okay. And we're not giants, though. We're giant personalities. And he's an avid home chef, scuba diver. He's married with a 4-year-old daughter. Wonderful. And another thing I want to say, Jared, I think I met Jared. His LinkedIn, his presence, his engagement, his contact is absolutely outstanding. And before I get to like something, Jared's already there liking and talking and posting. It's unbelievable, his content. So I suggest I'll attach his link to the podcast. Is if you want to know a lot about LinkedIn and great content in the food industry, follow Jared. It's unbelievable what he's got, and he's a real thought leader. And I really appreciate you attending the Bruce Singer podcast. So welcome, Jared.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, Bruce. Looking forward to it.
So let's share your story. How did you get to this point? Because you have a very unique story, and I'd love to hear it, and the audience would love to hear it. Share your story.
For sure. So let me start off way back in my undergrad days when I was a naive 17-year-old thinking that I'd become a veterinarian and follow my childhood dream, and then realize that academics are harder than they look. And it's a very competitive field. Tried to get into clinical psychology, tried that for a couple of years, that fell apart. And after that, I turned to my father, who's an entrepreneur himself, had a couple bulk food stores, had multiple different businesses, still has a couple. I said, "Hey, Dad, hire me into one of your businesses." And he said, in my mind at least, quote unquote, "Why the fuck would I hire you?" And I'm like, jaw hits the table. I'm like, I'm your number one son. I'm their firstborn. Like, help me out. I did all the schooling. Help me. He goes, "Look, you want to come join me in business, but you have no real business acumen. Yes, you ran your student security team back at your undergrad. You have a little bit of experience, but go do your BCom and we'll talk." And in my head, I went, the hell I'm doing a BCom. I've already got 2 bachelor's degrees in sciences. I'm going to do an MBA or bust. That took me to Schulich, where I did my MBA. And from day one, I happened to meet this wonderful gentleman by the name of Mike, who will be very important to our story in a little bit. But I also met a professor, Stephen Friedman, who he and I clicked on a whole bunch of different fronts. And about a year after I started, I said, "Hey, Stephen, I'm having a really tough time finding anything in management consulting or in learning and development, which is where I really wanted to go and focus. Do you happen to know anyone I might be able to be connected with?" He made an introduction to a gentleman by the name of Greg Witz, who, for reasons I still don't understand, took a chance on me and hired me. And I went to go work for him for there for just over 7 years, in fact. In management consulting, started off in technology training, worked full-time to finish my MBA full-time. Don't do that. Bad idea. Don't do both full-time. It stresses you out. I have many grays now because of that. But it was in management consulting for 7 odd years, working with everyone from small insurance brokerages and food and beverage manufacturers all the way up to the White House and the executive office of the president. Been to Camp David 3 times. Very, very cool stuff. During this entire time, this wonderful guy, Mike, who's been kept in touch, we're best of friends. We tried to get into business together a couple times, both around food. We're both big foodies. You mentioned I'm a big chef, cook, not chef, cook. He is as well. He's actually a little bit more trained than I am. And it just didn't work out because he's in banking and finance. So he's risk aware, as am I. So due to due diligence, both ideas fell apart. But he called me up about 6 years ago now and said, "Hey, Jared, I think I have an opportunity for us to be in business together." And I went, "Awesome." Long story short, he basically bought the think tank, is now the majority owner, brought me in to help run the show as the guy who knows marketing, or kind of knows marketing, wanted to learn more about marketing, knows how to build a business and a team. And that's what got me to the think tank, where we're a full service communications agency whose sole objective is helping brands get consumers to come and try and buy their products. So that's shopper marketing, is a technical term for those who know it. I came in knowing basically the theory from my textbook from 7 years ago in my MBA. So a big thing for me is having the right team around me to make sure we can execute. And right from day one, my two VPs, Sherry Ann, who heads up our strategy and accounts, and Justin, who does our creative, they are experts at what we do. And so it really allowed me to spend the first couple of years learning our business, understanding how we're different, learning about our consumers and prospects and the market at large. And that's really what I've been doing for a little bit over 5 years now, is kind of helping run the show, with a big part of what I do being the research and development side, which is where my LinkedIn becomes a big source of data and insights and info, because that's how I sell. Because I don't really sell or pitch, because if you need us, you'll call me and we'll come and we'll put together something beautiful just for you. But you're not going to need me 9 times out of 10. You're not going to need me when you meet me. So for me, it's all about giving value, sharing ideas, helping people get to that next step. And that's how I got involved with the think tank. Wander was a pandemic project. I'm deep in food, love food and beverage in a very big way, avid cook. The pandemic was rough for the agency, for sure, as it was for many people in our space. And so my brain kind of started going a little mushy in a good way, because I'm not an ideas guy. I'm the one I am with marketing ideas, but not product ideas. So I'm the one people would bring their ideas to, and I'd either help them build it or crash it if it just wasn't viable. But I was cooking one day and I was making this Thai sauce, peanut butter, sriracha, a bit of lime juice. I'm like, man, this just isn't right. This isn't authentic. I need those key flavors. And something in my brain clicked and went, why can't we make a spiced peanut butter with savory flavors? We do it with cinnamon and chocolate and maple and pumpkin spice, but why aren't we going savory? All these things have sugar and added oils to them. Let's not do that. And as I turned to ask my wife, who's my co-founder, about her thoughts on that idea, I saw a pot, a clean pot, mind you, but a pot sitting on my stove that we'd used to make this Moroccan stew a few days earlier. That peanut butter is a key ingredient in it. I went, oh, that one actually has cinnamon in it. So that's a nice transition from the mainstream sugary cinnamon to something more savory. And that kind of kicked off the whole thing. So after about a year of research and developments, we launched August of last year. So we've now been running for a little over a year. And the big reason I launched it was A, I had the idea, B, the market showed that it was somewhat viable. But C, it also filled a huge gap in my knowledge. And when I'm talking to founders and smaller emerging brands, because I'm a big believer that theory and secondhand knowledge can only get you so far. And if you're trying to give strategic or tactical advice, you need to really understand it at a firsthand level. And so part of the reason I launched Wander is so that I could understand what it's like to take this idea from your head and take it all the way to a retailer shelf. And whether I'm successful or not, that was a big driving force behind us going to market with it. And I have to say, it's been the most successful part of the entire Wander adventure, because food and beverage is unbelievably challenging, so difficult. And I thought I knew how tough it was. And I came in with more knowledge and better expectations than I'd say the vast majority of founders. And even I have been surprised, taken aback, underestimated cost and time requirements. So it's been an amazing journey. It's been an amazing journey that I'm thankful to have been on so far anyways.
So in terms of the Wander, when you say amazing journey, is there one key takeaway you can share with the audience, a learning takeaway?
There's a couple. The first one is whatever amount of time and money you think it's going to require, double it again, and then triple it. It is shocking, especially in the Canadian market. You know, there's still in the US, you can still have an idea, take out $10,000 and somewhat organically grow it sold from direct to consumer in a couple corner stores to your citywide grocer, to your statewide, to your regional, all the way up to national. And you can do it with relatively low CapEx because your sales can help you get there. In Canada, it's not an easy process, but that smooth process where you have retailer support all the way through and varying sizes of distributors and brokers so that you can graduate from one to the next simply doesn't exist. So one of my biggest learnings has been the capital required to grow. If your plan is to be in the majors, it's a substantial investment, right? You can't do it on a low 10K, 20K investment. You got to go in much larger. On the big retailers. Now, that being said, I had this great conversation with another brand founder recently who was talking about the margins required to do this. And, you know, typically if you want to go in the big ones, you need about a 50% margin on your wholesale price. Right. And if you don't have that, you can still do it, but it's going to be very challenging. And so before he crashed everything down, I said, before you do that, let me ask you, what's your definition of success? Do you want to be on every single shelf in every single retailer across the country and eventually be bought out for a couple of mil from some big player in 5-10 years? If that's what you're going after, then absolutely you need at least 50% margin and you need to be high growth, and that's the plan.
Yep.
In the same breath, I know founders who are sold within the province, have been doing this for 40 odd years, pull 150, 175,000 a year salary, love their life, have built out an amazing life for them and their families, and are completely content with that. And their margins are certainly not 50%. But it's both have a massive amount of grind and huge amounts of trying to prioritize life and family and work. But it really comes down to what's your definition of success? And so, I've talked to him again since that conversation. He goes, I'm trying to make my numbers hit 50 because I want the big play. I'm like, perfect, amazing. I'm happy that you know what that is and you know what it's going to take.
Good.
But that's something that I think a lot of founders don't really think about before they kick off. And it's definitely one of my biggest learnings is trying to reconcile all of that.
Well, I want to shift the conversation because, like, look, I see you as a major thought leader in this industry. So much. I see your posts and there's just so much information going on in your head. Okay, and I want to talk about the concept of innovation. That whole topic about what can you share about where the market is on innovation, consumer trends. What do you see? Do's, not do. That whole topic. We could probably talk for hours, but we don't. Okay.
Yeah, easily for hours.
What can you share? What can you share?
Yeah, we could definitely talk for hours. We could talk for days about this, Bruce. There's so
yeah.
much to talk about. But in a real nutshell, let's take a page out of the big brand books. I did a post about this recently, speaking of my LinkedIn content. But if you look at what Nestle, B&G, Mondelez, all these big players, what they've been doing over the last couple of years is refining their portfolios to really focus in on strengths. And when you look at what they're doing in terms of innovation, it's looking for the extensions to their existing product lines where there's demand. And that's a bit of a shift from what they were saying even a couple of years ago, where there was a hot trend and everybody jumped on it because it was the hot trend. And you see a lot of emerging brands trying to jump into that. Everyone's wanted to jump onto keto when it first started becoming hot. Everyone wanted to jump on gluten-free when it first started coming out. Everyone's on plant-based right now. And what ends up happening is you end up seeing this flood of product hit the market, and a lot of it, unfortunately, just isn't that good. Or it misses the mark on one quality or another where consumers just aren't interested, and you end up with a hyper-saturated market where nobody except a handful are doing it particularly well. And so it's kind of refreshing to see these big brands taking a step back from that to say, whoa, we've been investing into these hot categories and these hot products just because they're hot for right now, but that's not a sustainable growth model. And so they're trying to really scale it back to say, we might go in to do more plant-based, but we're not going to invest huge multi-millions into it just for the heck of it. We're going to say, we're Nestle, we're hyper invested into our frozen category. We know pizzas are a hyper competitive category. There is a large demand for alt crusts, so non-wheat crusts, and there is some demand for plant-based. We're going to experiment in that space, and we're going to test these before we roll them out large scale. And that's been a shift that's starting to happen. You see it coming out in the reports from all these brands. So innovation these days has to be really rooted in not just what's super hot, because that can be a flash in the pan. And flash in the pan for me can be even a full year and a half of us talking about it. And then it's starting to crumble and fade away. We're starting to take a bit of a decrease in market share. So it's got to be more than that. It's got to be a longer standing shift in consumer demand that to really drive the innovation to make it worthwhile. So, doing a lot of research and looking at where there's high repeat purchase is a big one. So, talking about plant-based meat analogs, huge number of them, massive number of them hit the market. Lots of them have shut down, or I'm expecting to see even more consolidation in the next couple of years in that category, because at the end of the day, there's just too many. Right? Everyone thought consumers wanted them, but as many people have pointed out, there's only space for so many fresh plant-based burgers, meat burgers on the market. There's only so much space in the freezer for those options, and consumers tried a lot of them and were underwhelmed. So you saw this spike in initial purchase, and then you look at the repeat purchase data, and it's very, very low. And so if you're looking at what's going on with Nestle and B&G, all these big ones, what's been happening in the last year and a half really is they've started to consolidate the portfolio so that they can really have a greater focus and specialty in set areas, really focusing on their strengths. And so if you look at Nestle, they're now the market leader and have the dominant market share in 70% of the categories that they play in. And so when you look at the innovation in terms of products, you're seeing them shift away from just wanting to jump on what's the hot, trendy, flash in the pan type thing to really starting to evaluate what's the long-term demand for this. Is there going to be a sustained presence for this? And this isn't to say they might not do something that's more of a flash in the pan as a limited time offer, but they're not going to put in the same type of investment they would as if it was a full product rollout. So if you start, as an example, if you look into frozen for Nestle, frozen pizza is a hyper competitive category. And so they might be looking to say, maybe we should have some plant-based options or some alt crust options, but they're just not going to invest tons and tons of money into it without seeing that there's going to be a long-term demand for that. And looking at the plant-based meat analogs is a prime example of an area where everybody jumped in 2 feet in, flooded the market with products, and most consumers tried it, went, yeah, they're not that good. They're missing on taste or texture. And my retailers are saying, look, we only got so much space in fresh. It's a highly commoditized area. We only have so much space in frozen. We don't need 17 frozen meat analogs. And so innovation these days is, and especially from what I'm seeing in my own belief as well, is that you can't be looking at just what's hot. You've got to be understanding whether this is a long-term shift in consumer behavior and what percentage of consumers are going to be continually turning into and tapping into this trend. So, it's not to say that you shouldn't be investing in plant-based or you shouldn't be innovating in keto, but even something like keto, we were just both at CHFA and we were listening into a number of different workshops from all sorts of wonderful people. One of the big takeaways I had from there is that there's a shift away from consumers looking for the keto product or the gluten-free product. Yeah. They want to see the no gluten type of label or the high fat or high in the specific fat, because it now becomes a product that everyone in the household can consume, not just them who are following that specific diet. Right. And so these types of trends are really important to look at, especially for big brands, but also small brands who are on limited budgets, who can only invest so much into innovation. Getting the naming of your product right, the focus, the unique differentiator, really important. So innovation today is much more than just following that.
Well, that's what I want to sort of interrupt. That's what I want to ask you. I mean, Nestle, they got a big budget. I mean, let's be serious. And we just came from CHFA. How does a $5 million company compete, or a $10 million, like your mid-sized companies? They're doing 5, 10, 20, 30 million. How do they compete? Where let's say they're at 5, 10 million right now, and then they want to go to the next level. Can you share your insights on that?
Sure. When you start looking at that, I can point to several different brands who I think are doing it really right to stand out in their space. Down in the US, you got Dude Wipe. They're flushable wet wipes for wiping your bum so you're nice and clean. Yeah. After all that, they've often shared how they try to expand into different categories, and they bombed. They were awful. So they scaled it all back. So I think the learning you can take from that and from all the other brands I see really excelling in what they do, Midday Squares being a great example of a Canadian brand doing it. They know exactly who they are, what their key product is, how they differentiate against everybody else in that category, and they shout it from their rooftops, and that's how they build a community around it. So that we do this, it's like Steam Whistle's old saying, right? We do one thing really, really well. That's what the top brands are really, what I'm seeing from the top brands who are really seeing that rapid growth is that they're hyper-focused on what they do, and any product extensions they do are natural extensions where there's a large amount of consumer demand. One of the only one I can think of that might buck that trend a little bit is Made with Local from East Coast Canada. Love their products. I just stocked up again because I was out. Delicious bars. And the founder really hesitated on launching their lemon squares for the longest time because research in the market said when it comes to granola bars and energy bars, people like their chocolate and peanut butter. Nobody wants lemon. And she said, no, there's got to be a market. Just no one wants it because it's not out there yet. And so they did a little bit of consumer testing, and when they launched, they couldn't keep it on shelves in their home markets out east. Oh. It's really tough to find even here in Ontario. But that one,
Apple's philosophy. There's nothing demand, but we're going to give it to them and create a demand.
Right, and that in my mind is a bit more of like a true innovation of looking at what's in the market and saying, you know what, there's a gap here. Everybody's making stuff with oats and nuts and chocolate, but nobody's tapping into lemon. And which is such an, you think lemon pies, lemon squares, all these delicious things. Why wouldn't you have one? And, so they rolled theirs out. Now, Taste of Nature has a lemon almonds out as well. They just launched that not too long ago. So, it's so important to do research and understand your consumer and understand your category in a really deep level. And that's where you get those wild innovations like Made with Local rolling out lemon when all the data says they shouldn't do it. It's because the data didn't exist. There was nothing there for them to measure, right? So they went to the consumer and said, would you like this? And the consumer said, yes.
So you're saying, and by the way, this is not to get into deeply, even if you're a $5 million, $10 million, or $20 million company, you can still do it's not, there's an opportunity to do some research and get it done. And even if it can't compete with the big Nestle's of the world, or, well, you mentioned one company, they're in the chocolate business and they're doing it.
They want to be the next Hershey.
Got it. So we're almost done. But so in your thoughts, can you say what's one thing about so I'm a 5-10, I always use, I'm the 5-10 million company, the future. What do I need to know for the future from your perspective?
A few different things. One, if you're doing anything in milk, meat, any type of animal product, you better have an eye on what's coming through in cultivated or cultured or fermented. All those areas are rapidly growing. There's a lot of discussion right now around naming of that and how consumers are going to be interested in bacteria creating milk versus a cow. Personally, I'm all over that. I can't wait for that to happen. For all sorts of reasons, ranging from environmental to animal welfare to me being lactose intolerant and knowing that I can get lactose-free milk made by bacteria. I'm on board. I'm a home brewer. I get this stuff. I love it. Yeah. All over it. But if you're even using any of those products as an ingredient in what you're making, you should start keeping an eye on it. Because in the same way that everyone has had an eye on plant-based for the last 5 years, this is an area that I think more people need to be paying attention to. I think within terms of diet, if you are a hyper-targeted diet-focused brand, really start paying attention to the broader spectrum of wellness, because consumers are starting to do that too. You know, they're not looking for that keto. They're not looking for, you know, the named diet. They're looking for the macronutrient, which we were discussing offline beforehand, how that's not necessarily the healthiest way to do things, but consumers are trying to take a more holistic view of how they approach things, so that whatever they buy can appeal to their entire household, not just them. So that's going to be really important. Naming. This comes up every few months when, as I talk to brands, is understanding the naming, but also the key trait that's defining the leaders in the category. So if you look at things like bone broth, grass-fed used to be the big deal. That was what everyone wanted. They wanted to see that the animals were well taken care of. Now it's organic. Organic is a bigger driver. And that's from, you know, that data is about 8 months old now. It might even be a little bit older. So, you know, that might have shifted again already too. So really understanding how your consumers in your category are picking those products, you have to be on top of that, because it guides everything from where you're going to be marketing, what retailers you go to what products you develop. You know, so that's going to be really, really huge. And then I think the biggest one is going to be knowing where your sandbox begins and ends, and that's important in determining your growth, right? If you want to be a Midday Squares, who their mantra is they want to be the next big, you know, next Hershey, the next Mondelez, they want to be a big player. That's a huge sandbox to play in. You've got to be prepared to go in a big way, from time, money, reason. Everything's going to be big, because that's your goal. If you're going to be a niche product targeting a niche community, that's also amazing, and I think it deserves just as much hooray and praise as the big ones. But that's going to be a very different strategy. It's going to require a different set of levers you pull, from everything from marketing to your product dev. So, you know, if you're that 5 mil brand who's targeting a hyper niche community, your marketing is going to be far more focused on that community where they are, versus hitting them along that consumer journey in terms of like a retail landscape. Because once you're in retail, if you're really unique and really stand out in that category, you don't need the in-store. So I often talk to these brands, I say, don't spend your 30, 40K to put coupons in everywhere when you're just going to be rewarding your existing members. Reach out to them, spend that money, and develop a personalized outreach where you're still going to give them the same savings, but now it's all tailored especially to them. And that personalization is going to become more and more important. And the data all supports that. That's going to become big.
Well, you know, Jared, this has been very, very insightful. Your knowledge is really exceptional, and
thank you.
And I could see you have I use the word the pulse on really what's going on, like today and the future. You got your hand on the pulse, which is incredible. And I thank you. And at some point, I'd love to have you back on, because you probably have a whole new set of a year from now of scenarios and stuff. But really interesting, very, very, very insightful. You're right about. I don't even know. You talk about keto. I don't even know if people really know what keto is. That's another. I don't want to get to it now. We don't want to have a 1 hour podcast. Remember, I told you.
That's it.
try to keep it 15, 20. Anyways, thank you so much, Jared.
Oh, my
Thank you
absolute
to the
pleasure. Thanks
audience.
for having
Have a
me on.
wonderful day. And we continue. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.